Apologists often assert that life requires a designer because it is complex, but of course there are many things that are complex that clearly don't need to be designed. A snowflake is sometimes given as an example of this.
There's a clear difference between a snowflake and life that leads many people to conclude that one is designed and the other isn't.
First, this concedes that complexity per se is not evidence of design. Simply saying that life needs a designer because it's complex is an obvious non sequitur. Secondly, what is it exactly that distinguishes between the complexity of a snowflake and the complexity of life?
The snowflake exhibits ordered complexity. A snowflake or ice crystal is a repetitive arrangement of atoms, and so it's ordered. It's ordered complexity. Think of coding a computer with the instructions to type A, B, C, and D, and then repeat it over and over again. This is highly repetitive complexity, but in this case, an ice crystal is just a highly repetitive geometric order. But the complexity we find in life isn't like that at all. Proteins and DNA are sequence specific. For example, the sequence of nucleotide bases in the DNA of every living cell is not some random or repetitive arrangement.
It's certainly not random, but what do you mean when you say it isn't repetitive? The DNA in each cell of an organism is largely the same, and we share significant portions of our DNA with trillions of other organisms. Life as a whole is a complex repetition and copying of information with occasional mutations that add complexity.
Instead, the bases are sequence specific to code for functional proteins.
Well, what do you mean by functional? This dude seems to use the term functional to mean that certain DNA sequences have the consequence of producing proteins that perpetuate survival and reproduction. However, there are also mutations that code for proteins that have no function, or have deleterious consequences. DNA sequences don't exist for any particular protein. Rather, they have the consequence of producing particular proteins. It seems to be a common fallacy among apologists to assume that if a particular biological occurrence has a specific biological consequence, that occurrence therefore exists for the purpose of bringing about that consequence. This does not logically follow. Proteins, both the functional ones and the non-functional ones, are the consequence of the existence of DNA, not the purpose of DNA. Natural selection, however, tends to filter out the sequences which are not functional. Given that functional, in the sense that this guy seems to mean, is practically defined as being able to pass through the filter of natural selection, there really isn't any need to infer the help of an intelligent designer to explain why such DNA sequences exist. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.